Hello everyone, I'm Kanupriya Sharma and I welcome you to this video solution for an official weekend question by GMATQuizMaster. A lot of you would have noticed that you don't get to solve a lot of inference questions. So why is that topic important? And why am I talking about inferences while discussing a weekend question? The answer is your ability to draw inferences helps you not just in inference question, but in every other question type. So it helps you in other questions in CR, in RC, and even in Quant and DI. And that is why this ability to draw correct inferences is very important. The question that we are going to discuss today is one of the best examples to understand that. It is not just important to draw inferences when you are reading the passage. It is also important to draw inferences when you are reading the answer choices. Only then you will understand what is the impact of that answer choice and how it can be related to the logic of the passage. So let's solve this question together and understand the importance of drawing inferences. Let's start with passage analysis. Guillemots are birds of Arctic regions. So we have been given a name guillemots and we have been told that these are birds of Arctic regions. So these are birds found in Arctic regions. They feed on fish that gather beneath thin sheets of floating ice. Now, what does they refer to? They refer to guillemots. So guillemots feed on fish. Which fish? Fish that gather beneath thin sheets of floating ice. So you can imagine it, Arctic region, there would be snow, the water there would be frozen. So just imagine it like this, that there is a water body which is frozen, and then at places there are thin sheets of floating ice. The fish that is found beneath those thin sheets of floating ice is something that these guillemots eat. All right, so you can imagine them breaking those thin sheets of floating ice with their beak or something and feeding those fish. And they nest on nearby land. So they nest, the nest that they have is on nearby land. All right. Guillemots need 80 consecutive snow free days in a year to raise their chicks. Now, this is a requirement that is given to us that they need 80 consecutive snow free days, which means that one after the other, they need to get 80 snow free days in continuation, in sequence, to be able to raise their chicks. Which means that if, let's say, it does not snow for, let's say, 75 days, and it snows on the 76th day, it would mean that they will not be able to raise their chicks. If, let's say, it does not snow on 76th day but it snows on the 80th day, again they will not be able to raise their chicks. They need 80 consecutive snow free days to raise their chicks. So this is a requirement given to us. Let's read further. So because of this requirement, something is happening. Until average temperatures in the Arctic began to rise recently. So, this is a recent event given that the average temperature started to rise recently in the Arctic. So, it is becoming warmer. Recently, it has started becoming warmer. Until that time, before that happened, the Guillemots range was limited to the southernmost Arctic coast. Remember, this is a reason given. This is an impact of this condition, that because they need 80 consecutive snow free days, so until this temperature started to increase, the range of guillemots, that is, the areas in which they can stay, the limits of that area, it was limited. This area was limited to the southernmost Arctic coast. So you can imagine, if this is, let's say, just to visualize north and south. So if this is the Arctic region, then they were limited here in southernmost coast. So this was their range earlier. Now, and you can imagine, as you move northwards, it will start becoming more cold, which means that in the other areas, they were not able to meet this 80 days requirement. They were not getting 80 consecutive snow free days. And because of that, only this region was able to fulfill their requirement. And that is why their range was limited to this region until the average temperature began to rise. So this was only till the time the average temperature began to increase. All right. Therefore, so we have a conclusion coming now. Therefore, if the warming continues, now if the warming continues, what will happen? The average temperatures will increase further. Let's see what the conclusion says. The Guillemot's range will probably be enlarged by being extended northward along the coast. Now it is saying that this range will be enlarged. Enlarged means it will increase, right? It is not saying that it will shift, that they will shift from here to here. That is not what they are saying. They are saying that if this was the region earlier, now their range will extend. If they were in, let's say, 10 kilometers earlier, now it may extend to maybe 20 kilometers. It will be enlarged. How it will be enlarged? It will be enlarged by extended by being extended northward along the coast. So along the coast only. Why along the coast? Because they feed on fish and they nest on the land nearby. So most likely because of that, they will be able to extend their range by moving northward. So the conclusion is specifically that the range will be enlarged, one, by being extended northward. So it is not talking about any other possible way of extending the range. It is not saying that, okay, let's understand the logic now. So we have been given that these birds are from Arctic region and they used to occupy the southernmost coast. Their range was limited to this portion only because of this requirement, which means that the other areas were not able to meet this requirement. Now, when the temperatures have started to increase, what can we expect? We can expect that more areas will be able to provide these 80 consecutive snow-free days. If that can happen, these guillemots will be able to stay in these regions also. They will be able to occupy these regions also. And as a result, their range can probably get enlarged by being extended in the northward direction. The northern areas will be able to meet this requirement, and because of that, Guillemot will be able to stay in the southern region also where it is staying right now. Plus, it will have more areas where it can go if it moves northwards. So that is the logic being used. Now, are there any logical gaps in this logic? Let's understand. Again, we are considering that the warming continues. This is a condition that we are considering to be true in order to arrive at the conclusion. So, if this condition is true, the author is saying that Guillemot's range will probably be enlarged by being extended northward along the coast. Now, we know that the author's logic is that the other regions, these northern regions, the northern regions, they may be able to meet the 80 snow free days requirement, the consecutive snow free days, because of this increase in temperature. And that is why guillemots will be able to move in this area. Now, are there any other reason? Is it the only requirement? Do we know that? Do we know that it is the only reason why I write G for guillemots, why guillemots do not stay in northern regions? The author has not given us that answer. The author has said that, okay, if this one requirement is met, then we can expect them to move northwards. However, the author has not said that it is the only requirement. Maybe there are some other issues as well. So, this is a logical gap in author's reasoning. The other thing is that what will be the impact of increase in temperature on the current habitat? That is, if temperature continues to increase, will guillemots be able to survive in the southernmost region, which is their current habitat? Will they be able to survive in that region? That is something that the author has not explained. So, these are some of the logical gaps in the author's reasoning. With this understanding, let's update our bridge table. So, if your understanding of the passage logic, meaning as well as logic was correct, mark a tick here. However, if you faltered anywhere, if you missed any inference, if you missed understanding that guillemots have a requirement because of which they are restricted to the southernmost area, if you did not understand the logic that how these things are connected, how the author is arriving at the conclusion, mark a cross here and write down the exact reason here. Again, the conclusion, it is very important here. We saw that the conclusion is specifically about the range being enlarged. So it's not just shifting, it is being enlarged, that it is increasing, and it is increasing by being extended northward along the coast, not by any other means. So if you missed any of these two aspects, mark across here and write down the reasons here. This reason, Now, let's understand what the correct answer choice here should say. The question says, which of the following, if true, most seriously weakens the argument? So we need to find a weakener here. So what will the correct weakener convey? The correct weakener will convey that Guillemot's range may not be enlarged by being extended northward along the coast. So either it will not be enlarged or it will not be enlarged by being extended northward along the coast, or both of them. Neither of them would happen. All right. Now, if you want, we can think some scenarios in which this can happen based on the logical gaps that we have identified. So we have identified two logical gaps. First is that the 80 consecutive snow-free days requirement is the only reason why guillemots do not stay in the northern region. So a weakener can convey that there is some other issue in the northern regions because of which guillemots cannot survive there. So even if this issue is solved, they may not be able to move northwards because of some any other particular reason. Now, the second thing can be based on this logical gap, impact of temperature increase on current habitat, because we are saying that it will be enlarged by being extended northward. That is, the current habitat will continue to be their habitat, and plus, this is the current one, and plus additional will be added to it. That is what the conclusion is. So if they have to move out of the current habitat because of increase in temperature, then the conclusion will not be true. So anything that indicates that, okay, they may have to leave the current habitat because of increasing temperature, then also our conclusion will be weakened. So any reason why guillemots may not survive in current habitat, as in impact of increasing temperature. So these are two logics based on which the correct answer choice can be there. There can be other scenarios as well, but ultimately they will convey that this range may not get enlarged by being extended northward along the coast. Now let's come back to our bridge table. If you were able to identify what the correct answer choice needs to convey, mark a tick here. However, if you skipped the step, or if your understanding here was incorrect, mark a cross here. Most likely, if your understanding was incorrect, it can be because you did not understand the conclusion correctly. That it is not just about the range being enlarged, it is about the range being enlarged by being extended northward. It's not that they are shifting somewhere else, that is not allowed. Any other way of extending the range is not allowed. So if that confusion was there, your understanding of what the correct answer choice needs to convey will be incorrect, and you need to mention the exact reason here. As mentioned earlier, choice A, even if the warming trend continues. So this choice is assuming that the warming trend will continue, but even then something will happen. There will still be years in which guillemot chicks are killed by an unusually early snow. Now, this choice is kind of talking about an exception, that okay, warming is continuing, but there will be years, there will be few years. So that is like an exception. And what the exception is that in those exceptional years, the guillemot chicks will be killed by unusually early snow. So the weather would be unusual one. Now, exceptions will not decide whether guillemots will move northwards or not, right? If let's say this is the reason, if let's say this is the only reason why they are not moving northward. And usually, in most of the year, because of this warming, they start meeting this requirement in the other regions also. Then there's no reason why they would not extend their range. If they are getting everything there, they are getting this 80 consecutive snow free days, they are getting their food there, or everything is available, then why would they not move? Because this unusually early snow, this is an exception, and this can happen in their current habitat also. So this choice does not give a convincing enough reason why guillemots may not move. It does not convey, or it does not make us question the conclusion that guillemots may move, they may extend their range by moving northwards, because it talks about an exception. And that is why choice A is incorrect. Now, if you selected choice A, let's move back to the bridge table. Then did you understand the meaning of this choice? This is the first question that you need to ask. The second question that you need to ask is, did you gauge the alignment? Did you see that, okay, it conveys something which the correct answer choice needs to convey? Now, if you did both of these, most likely you did not understand that an exception cannot define the general behavior. It cannot help understand how the general behavior would be. So that was your reason for marking choice A. Please, choice B. If the Arctic warming continues, so again, we are considering the condition that this Arctic warming continues, guillemots' current predators, so we are talking about current predators of guillemots, are likely to succeed in extending their own range further north. So this choice is saying that right now, these guillemots stay in this southernmost coast, along the southernmost coast. Now, if they extend, if warming continues, and we are questioning that whether they will, or rather, we are concluding that they should be able to extend their this range by moving northward along the coast. So this choice is saying that if this trend of warming continues, then the current predators, that is, predators that are working in this area, in this particular area in which guillemots are staying right now, they are also likely to succeed in extending their own range. They may also come in these northern areas. Now, does that help us question the conclusion? Does it raise that doubt in your mind that, okay, will guillemots be able to move northwards then? No, it should not. Why? Because these are the current predators. Guillemots are already facing these predators. These are not any new predators. We mentioned earlier that, okay, maybe there's some other reason because of which they will not be able to stay in the northern areas. However, this is not a new reason. This is an issue that they have been facing in the current habitat also. So even if it continues to their new habitat, to the new regions, they will not face a difference. If it was about new predators, that okay, the northern areas will have a lot more predators than there are in this current region, then that would have been an issue, a disadvantage of moving to these northern areas. That would have helped us question the conclusion that okay, maybe they will not move and not extend their range. But since it is only about current predators, it is already something that they are facing, so that may not prevent them from extending their range. So that is why choice B is also incorrect. If you selected this answer choice, you either missed this word current, or you did not understand the impact of this word current, that it is something that they are already facing, so this may not prevent them from moving northwards, and that is why you selected it. So please update. Choice C. Guillemots nest in coastal areas where temperatures are generally higher than in inland areas. So, this choice tells us that they nest in coastal areas, and it is something that we already know because we know that guillemots nest on nearby land. Also, the conclusion is saying that their range will be extended northward along the coast. So, the information that this choice brings in, choice C, does not make us question the conclusion because the conclusion is already saying that they will move along the coast only. The conclusion is not considering that their range will be extended by moving to inland areas. The conclusion is not considering these inland areas. And that is why this information does not make us question the conclusion that will guillemots move to these northern areas? Will they extend their range? No, it does not help us question the conclusion. And that is why this choice is also incorrect. If you selected this answer choice, then most likely you missed this information that the conclusion is not talking about moving to inland areas. And you probably that is why you selected choice C. So please update your bridge table accordingly. And with that, let's move to choice D now. Choice D. If the Arctic warming continues, so again, we are considering the same condition, much of the thin ice in the southern Arctic will disappear. Now, what do we know about thin ice? We know that there are these fish beneath, the fish that gather beneath thin sheets of floating ice is something that the guillemots feed on. If this thin ice melts because of this increasing temperature, if this thin ice disappears, it is probable that the fish will not gather in that area, or maybe sufficient number of fish will not gather in that area, because of which guillemots will not be able to feed themselves. Guillemots will not be able to feed uh, themselves. Now, what does that indicate? It indicates that guillemots may have to migrate from this area. That is, they may have to leave the current habitat. Now, what does that mean? Because our conclusion was saying that if this is the current habitat, this will stay, it will get enlarged, by extending northward. We notice that it is not saying that these birds will completely shift to new areas and that is how their range will be extended. That is not what the conclusion said. The conclusion said that it will be enlarged. The new area will be added to the current area. But this choice indicates that this current area, the guillemots, the birds may have to leave this current area. Now, yes, they may occupy a larger region, but that is not what the conclusion is saying. And that is why this conclusion, this choice helps us question the conclusion. Will this range be enlarged by extending northward along the coast if the warming continues? This helps us raise questions on that conclusion, and that is why this choice is the correct weakener. Now, if you rejected this answer choice, it is important to understand why did you reject it. The most likely reason is that you did not understand the impact of this choice. You did not understand what can happen if these thin sheets of ice disappear. What will be the impact on food that guillemots have? How will that impact their range? So you did not understand the impact of this answer choice. Maybe you just read it and understood just the meaning. You did not connect it to the information that you have already been given, an important requirement that has already been mentioned, that they feed on fish that gather beneath this ice. So that is why it is always important not just to understand the meaning of the choice, but to understand its impact as well. So please, choice E. The fish that guillemots eat are currently preyed on by a wider variety of predators in the southernmost Arctic regions than they are further north. So in southernmost Arctic regions, that is the current habitat, if we compare it to the northern regions, then this fish that they feed on, these guillemots feed on, this is eaten by a number of other animals as well, a number of other predators as well. However, if we compare to north, there are there are fewer animals or fewer predators that feed on this fish. So what does this choice indicate? This choice indicates that if if guillemots move northwards, they will have better access to food in north, which kind of tells us that there is a higher probability because there's an advantage of moving northwards, so most likely they will move northwards. So this choice, if at all, it conveys that the conclusion can be true, so it acts as a strengthener instead of a weakener. With this, we have finished this question. You saw how important it was to draw inferences while reading the passage and when analyzing the answer choices to get to the correct answer. You have your bridge table updated for this question and you can easily update your error log now. Please let us know if you need any help understanding the corrective actions. Good luck.